Yusung thought he was sick. His heart started palpitating, his palms grew sweaty, and he was so out of focus that he was losing his streak on the LOLOL leadership boards. He downed a cup of coffee, glaring at his bedroom clock, which stared back at him with a 22:12 p.m. in bright blue lights. It was way too early to be feeling tired, he thought. He sighed, exiting the server and letting the game's background music blast through the computer's speakers. He placed a hand to his neck, feeling for a warm temperature, only to end up confused as he realized he was not even remotely feverish. Worriedly, he called you up, sure that you would know what was up with him. "Hey, traveler," he said, going back to his desk to take another swig of coffee. He joined another server, hoping LOLOL would help calm his nerves. Why was he always so nervous when he was talking with you? He prattled on about his supposed symptoms as he patiently waited to be connected to the server.
"Sounds like you're in love,"
you suddenly blurted out. He almost sprayed his coffee all over his computer at those words. He could tell you were joking. You were joking, right? Right? He tried to come up with a reply, but all that came out of him was a strangled sound. He heard your laughing from the other end.
"Oh, bullseye!" "So, who's the lucky person? Is it me you've fallen for?"
Yusung's eyes widened at this, and his heart felt like it was about to burst out of his chest and start tap dancing on his desk. He was stunned to a silence. His mind was racing, wondering whether or not to confirm your statement. Well, that would certainly explain why he always felt so worked up around you. Before he could even answer your question, he heard your awkward laughter on the other end of the phone.
Hey, I was kidding. Playing some LOLOL might calm your nerves, but I suggest not staying up too late. It might actually be a fever after all.
Yusung managed to quickly blurt out an apology as well as a thank you, before wishing you a good night and ending the call without waiting for your reply. He leaned back on his chair, staring at the cream-colored ceiling above him. It was when he placed both of his hands on his chest and felt the rhythmic thumping of his heart. It was when he tried to steady his breathing, and when he finally did, he remembered what you said and wheezed. It was when he realized that he knew the answer to your earlier question, but he was too shy, too scared to actually answer you. It was when he made a promise to tell you, face to face and unabashedly, one day. Yusung's eyes lingered to his desk clock. It was at 22:17 p.m. on an LOLOL-filled Tuesday night that he realized that he was completely head over heels in love with you. Zen couldn't sleep. He was lying in bed, positively tired after a day's work. He knew he did well earlier, yes, but his own self-reassuring thoughts did very little for his nerves. Ever since the whole hacking situation, he had been on edge during his performances. He couldn't help but be upset at himself for not giving his all for his audiences. Despite being an egotistical prick, as Juman called it, he was often hit by waves of doubt during these late sleepless nights. His self-reassuring thoughts began to shift into ones of doubt, pushing him to twist and turn in his suddenly uncomfortable bed. Was he genuinely a good actor? Did people watch his musicals for his talents or for his looks? Would he ever be more than just a handsome face up on the stage? He was jolted back to reality by the sudden ringing of his cell phone. He begrudgingly reached out to view the caller ID. You. Without a second thought, he immediately answered the call. Your cheerful voice was tinged with a hint of your own wariness. He felt his heart begin to swell, savoring the way your voice said his name. Can't sleep either, he said, genuinely happy to find you calling him out of all the other RFA members.
Yeah,
he heard you say.
I was hoping you were awake. I'm glad I was actually right.
His chest tightened at this, and he couldn't help but smile at the thought of you thinking about him at such an hour. He found a sort of solace in you, thankful for your constant presence amidst all the happenings in his life. The two of you conversed, and he found the weight on his shoulders gradually become lighter. His heart was both calm and erratic, and he found himself laughing together with you, despite being miles apart. When he heard you congratulate him for the show he put on, for being such an amazing actor on stage, for doing so well, even if he may not believe so, he almost started to cry.
You're doing so well, Zen. I'm sure all your fans can agree that you're doing so much more. I mean that, truly. If you ever need anyone to talk to, I'm here. So is Jaehee and the rest of the RFA.
You said from the other end of the line, and he allowed himself to think that you meant it. No, he knew you meant it. It was in the way that you spoke to him that he knew you were saying nothing but the truth. It was when you said your goodnight that he caught himself almost saying it. He pursed his lips, blundering out a goodnight of his own before slamming the end call button. It was when his eyes shot open and he felt a ditzy smile grace his lips. It was when his self-doubting thoughts were replaced by thoughts of you. He brought his pale hands to his hair, and he couldn't help but marvel at how much you affected him. It was when he caught himself thinking about you and wonder, did he realize that he was crazy about you? Jaehee was completely confused. She was standing by the stage, fingers fidgeting with her ID lace. She had never been this nervous for a party before. It wasn't that she doubted your ability at party planning. No, she was quite impressed, actually. It was just that you yourself was right there, amidst all the partygoers, and they were going to meet for the first time. Jaehee wasn't quite sure why the latest RFA recruit had her in such a weird state. Despite the whole situation with Jumin and her wariness from taking care of Zen, she felt strangely energized at the thought that she would meet you tonight. Normally, Zen's presence would have been enough, but tonight was definitely not one of those times. No, she wanted nothing more than to talk to you, and the thought that you might not actually enjoy her physical company was enough to fill Jaehee's mind with negativity. Jaehee! She heard Yusung's cheerful voice call out to her. She directed her attention to the blonde, who was waving at her from the buffet. She slowly made her way there, still anxious about how to approach you for the first time. She quirked her eyebrow at Yusung and said, "Is there anything bothering you, Yusung?" "Me? No. I was going to ask you the same thing, actually. It isn't normal for you to look so antsy," he said, lips quirking into a small smile. Jaehee couldn't help but be surprised that Yusung, of all people, had seen right through her. She sighed, nodding in agreement. I just don't quite understand why I feel so excited over meeting them. Jaehee started, nodding at the direction of you. She watched Yusung's eyes flickered over to the RFA planner before continuing. I mean, they're a dear friend, but they're so much more than that. They're amazing, supportive, and kind. I'm just nervous about making a mistake in front of them, I suppose. Jae-hee couldn't help but blush at the slew of words that flew out of her mouth. Yusung let out an amused huff before settling into a small teasing smile. Jae-hee, you're the most organized person I know. You won't make a mistake. Besides, you understand perfectly well why you feel so excited. You said it yourself. She blinked. Jae-hee recalled her earlier words, eyes widening in realization at the particular moment. They were so much more than that, she thought. Taking deep breaths, she couldn't help but let out a giggle at the way she acted. She thanked Yusung, who nodded over to Yu with a wink. She felt her feet move and her heart race, and before she knew it, she was right in front of Yu. It was when she first looked at you face to face and in the flesh, and the word breathtaking was not enough to describe you. It was when she heard your laughter in person for the first time, and she couldn't help but want to hear that laughter forever. It was when she couldn't stop smiling at how you tucked your hair behind your ears, or how your eyes lit up when Jae-hee finally started talking about her plans for a cafe. It was when the words, "Will you be my partner?" tumbled out of her mouth did she finally accept that she was absolutely smitten. Jumin felt like he was going insane. Ever since he let you stay with him at his apartment, he had thought of nothing but you and Elizabeth III's safety. He had been pushing Lucille and the rest of the RFA to work on the problem while he tried to get in touch with V, the only other person who could help them. It was the first time he had felt so helpless with the situation, and it wasn't a pleasant feeling. He was used to being in control, but now everything was happening so quickly, he found himself wondering if he would ever get the chance to breathe. He leaned back on his leather chair, letting out a heavy sigh. His earlier conversation with Elizabeth III had been bothering him for hours now. Did he truly mean what he had said earlier? He thought to himself, recalling how distant he had felt with Elizabeth III. Was he simply projecting certain feelings towards the beautiful Persian feline? Would there be anyone who would truly understand him? Before he could think deeper into this, he detected a peculiar scent wafting into his study. He narrowed his eyes, wondering just what was causing such a strangely appetizing scent. He abruptly stood up, making his way into his pristine kitchen. He was pleasantly surprised at the sight of you hunched over the stove. An assortment of vegetables and a bowl of shredded cheese lay atop the kitchen counter, and he watched you pour what looked like ground beef into a pan. Jumin strode over to you, and he watched you turn to him with a look of embarrassment.
"Oh, Jumin! I'm so sorry. I wanted to use the kitchen for a moment and, well, looks like I've been caught,"
you said shyly. He shook his head, offering you a gentle smile and reassurance. "It's fine," he said before looking pointedly at the piece of kitchenware atop his stove. He grew curious as to what you were preparing. After all, his pantry housed a wide array of ingredients, and yet your dish seemed so simple, something contrary to what he would usually feed himself. "What dish are you preparing?"
Well, I couldn't understand what was written most of the ingredients, so I ended up just making some tacos,"
you said, moving to add pepper and seasoning into the pan. Jumin felt his eyebrows scrunch up together. Tacos? Weren't those the tortilla dishes served at those fast food restaurants. The bouts of laughter that came from you indicated that he did not say those words to himself. He cleared his throat, mildly cursing his lack of knowledge on such cuisine. He felt a slight heat rise up on his cheeks. What was wrong with him? He was normally so composed in front of people. I can assure you my tacos are healthier, if you're curious. You paused to gesture over to the seats by the kitchen counter. I can let you watch how I prepare it. You said this gently, and Jumin didn't know whether to be amused at the fact that he was learning from you, of all people, or at the fact that he was actually learning how to prepare tacos, of all dishes. He found himself seated comfortably, and as he listened to you humming, he let himself relax, if only for a while. After a couple of minutes, Jumin found himself face to face with you and a plate of freshly made tacos. He reached over to grab a knife and fork from the cutlery drawer when you handed him a few pieces of tissues. He watched as you gracefully picked up a tortilla shell, which was filled with ground beef, lettuce, cheese, and other ingredients that you had managed to pick from the pantry. He mimicked your actions, carefully making sure that the filling wouldn't spill onto his three-piece suit. He brought the tortilla shell to his mouth, taking a medium-sized bite into it. It was when he savored the taste of something he would consider as commoner food and found himself wanting, wishing for more of your cooking. It was when he found you smiling widely at him, a stray piece of lettuce finding itself at the front of your teeth. It was when he found himself chuckling and pointing to his own teeth to signal you. It was when a blush rose to your cheeks, tainting you a pretty pink color. It was when he, for the first time in days, felt genuinely relaxed without Elizabeth III around. It was when he sensed the constantly rising beat of his metronome heart, and when he wished that the rest of his days would be filled with your ringing laughter, your delicious cooking, and just you. He wanted to be with you. It was when he realized that he was ready to let go of everything else, just to have you by his side, did he figure out he was absolutely bewitched by you. Se-young had been in denial since the beginning. He was pretty sure he had fallen for you the moment he caught you smiling at one of the CCTV cameras. It was when he had told a joke in the chat room, and although it was an obscure one, you managed to retort a witty reply. For a brief moment, he let himself look at the cameras, and he caught you smiling widely, as if you knew he would be looking at you. It was in the way you smiled, with your nose scrunching up and your hair falling out of place, that he knew he was completely done for. Of course, he knew he had to push these dangerous feelings back to the deepest recesses of his heart. His line of work meant putting anyone he cared about in danger, and Lord knew what he would do if you were in danger. He just couldn't afford risking your life for his own selfish desires. He wouldn't be able to give you the life you deserved anyway. This denial stage, however, was slowly getting tiring. Se-young thought as he took a break from the never-ending wave of work that Vanderwood kept sending him. He cracked his knuckles and pushed himself away from his desk. He figured he had time to tinker around with his spare parts right now. It was the least Vanderwood could give him after pushing him to work to the bone. He stepped into his glorious garage, and he found himself smiling as he saw all of his cars lined up neatly and in pristine condition. He walked over to his workbench, and he quickly took a seat at one of the chairs propped up against it. He felt his fingers fidget, and he found himself wondering why he wanted to tinker in the first place. Because he wanted to stop thinking about you, he thought to himself as he let out a long sigh. He had been reminiscing on one of the first few moments he had felt attracted to you earlier. Shaking his head, he let his hands move to the assortment of cogs and gears that made up his spare parts pile. However, despite his best efforts at concentrating on building, he couldn't get your face out of his thoughts. You were all he could think about nowadays. Your perfectly curved lips and your wide, curious eyes filled up most of his dreams. Your witty and hilarious responses made his heart sing, and when he would catch you waving at the cameras, he couldn't help but be drawn to you. You filling up his thoughts led to him worrying about you and your safety. Every day he would wish for nothing but the opportunity to go to you and to be there by your side. He knew his feelings were becoming dangerous, but there was just so much a man could take. If only there was some way to keep you both safe and happy without physically being there, he thought to himself, sullenly. He looked down at his hands, surprised to see a half-finished robot of sorts there. He narrowed his eyebrows, focusing on building and combining the many parts with one another. Somehow he knew what he was doing without a concrete and cohesive plan. Within an hour, he managed to assemble a robot cat of sorts. He pushed a button near the nape of its neck, and he was amused to find that it spewed out fire.
Perhaps this will protect you, traveler,
he said before he could even think about it. His eyes widened at his own words, and he shook his head, letting go of his creation. He was silent, but only for a moment. He immediately pushed his glasses upward, reaching for his phone. Before he could properly think about it, he snapped a picture and sent it to the chat room. It was when he leaned back and soaked up the scent of oil and metal lingering from when he created the robot. It was when he felt the blood rushing to his ears at the realization that he made this for you. For you. It was when he felt his heart skip a beat at the sight of your name, his hands flying to see what you had written back. It was when he found himself smiling at your response despite his best efforts not to. It was when he shook his head, trying so hard to deny it, yet knowing his attempts were in vain, that he realized he had fallen madly in love with you. It was when he least expected to fall in love that he found love coming at him at full speed, and he was absolutely, wholly enraptured by you.